It was a busy day for the New York Giants as they added guys and they brought back guys. We're going to break it all down. Plus, we're going to hear from Jake Arthur of LockedOn Colts on one of the guys that the Giants brought in on Thursday. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. The Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Traina, and folks, what a busy Thursday for the New York Giants in free agency. They signed a couple new people. They re-signed a couple of people. We're going to talk about that. Then in segment 2 of the program, we're going to have Jake Arthur back on the show. Jake Arthur is the co-host of Locked On Colts. He's going to tell us about Parris Campbell, who is one of the new players that the Giants signed on Thursday. And then in the third segment, I have a couple of questions from you, so I will make sure to address those as well. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. And before we get started, just real quick, if you haven't had a chance to check out yesterday's live stream, we went 2.5 hours. It was yours truly, Bad Dog and Entertainer. Had a great time, covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics. So if you have nothing better to do in the next few days and you need something to kind of fill in your time, check out that podcast. It was a lot of fun, actually. And as always, we answered questions from the people who were in attendance. So anyway, let's get into what the Giants have done. Very busy day for the Giants. Now, it started off with actually the night before, we got the late word that the Giants had signed former Jets receiver Jeff Smith. Now, people are like, oh, big deal. What about Jeff Smith? Jeff Smith, ladies and gentlemen, probably going to be a gunner for the Giants on special teams. You know, we talk about special teams, and a lot of people say to me, oh my gosh, you know, why did they re-sign Jamie Gillian? And my answer to that is, yes, Jamie Gillian was inconsistent, but he did not have a solid gunner to work with really all of last year. So having a good gunner can really make a difference for a punter. And I believe Jeff Smith is probably going to be like a 4 or 5 receiver, you know, a 4th or 5th on the depth chart, going to be primarily a special teams guy. Because if you think about it, you know, the other guys that the Giants have brought back, Isaiah Hodgins, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, who, you know, they re-signed on a Thursday. They're not really guys that contribute on special teams. So you need guys to contribute on special teams. And that's what Jeff Smith is going to bring to the table. The Giants also agreed to terms with Parris Campbell from the Colts. Now, this is an interesting signing, I think. Parris Campbell, 1-year deal, not a lot of money. And I'll talk a little bit about, you know, the money and the contracts and whatnot coming up. But Parris Campbell can play slot. He can play the outside. His deal was for 1 year, and I believe it was 1.5 million signing bonus, 1.4 million base salary, which is fully guaranteed, $100,000 workout bonus, and up to 1.7 million in per game roster bonuses. Campbell having had some injury issues up until last year. I think last year was the first year he made it through the whole season. So that's a nice depth signing to go along with, you know, what the Giants had. And Campbell also has incentives up to 1.9 million for, you know, touchdowns and other, you know, incentives, yardage and stuff like that. So Campbell's coming off his best season. He was available for every game, caught 63 of 91 pass targets, 623 yards and 3 touchdowns, all career high. And he didn't have any drop passes, as I mentioned in my YouTube short video on the YouTube channel. So, an intriguing receiver with a lot of upside. And in the next segment, we're going to hear from Jake Arthur. He's going to tell us more about Parris Campbell and what he brings to the table and what his strengths and weaknesses are. But not a bad signing, I think, considering what the Giants are trying to do, which I'll explain in just a moment. The Giants re-signed a couple guys. Jihad Ward, which we kind of expected would be the case. So Hadi is back, a Wink Martindale favorite. And they re-signed Darius Slayton. Now, Slayton was the surprise for me. I did not think they were going to bring Slayton back, but they brought him back on a 2-year deal worth about $12 million with a max value of $16.5 million. And, and thinking about it, even though I'm surprised he's back, because quite honestly, I thought he would get a better deal elsewhere. And he actually, according to reports, did get a better contract offer from the Atlanta Falcons, but he turned that down to return to the Giants. One of the things I like about what happened with Slayton is here's a guy who last year, if you remember, everybody thought he was done, that he wasn't going to come back. The Giants were done with him. They were going to move on from him. He took a pay cut to stay with the team. He was inactive in the beginning part of the year, and then injuries and lack of performance kind of pushed him to the forefront, and he delivered. He never complained. He never pulled the I should be playing regardless attitude that Kenny Golladay had. Darius Slayton was a pro's pro. And you know what? He was rewarded for that with a 2-year deal. And I just want to talk about that real quick, because one of the things this front office has done in the now 2 years that it has been in charge of the Giants is it's been a group of its word. They reward good performance, good locker room behavior, guys who are all about team, guys who are willing to come in and work and put their personal needs aside for the good of the team. They're transparent with these guys. You think back to what Joe Schoen said in his media appearances at the end of the season, at the combine, even during the Daniel Jones presser. And basically everything Schoen has said, he's followed through on. He spoke about, with receivers that you don't necessarily have to get a number one via a trade, that sometimes you can work around that. And he's just built this roster. The way he's built this roster this offseason so far is kind of interesting. No one guy, with the exception of really Jones, has signed for more than, I want to say, 3 years. Jones and Bobby Okereke have signed the long-term contracts. But even those contracts have outs. So what I like about what Schoen is doing is I go back to something he said. And he said, ideally, you want to build up with guys you scout and you bring in through the draft and you develop, because then you get to know them. You get to know how they work. You get to know, their weaknesses and their strengths. And you're not starting over really with a guy that's another coaching staff developed. So by issuing a lot of these short-term contracts, that's what Shane's kind of doing. He's got some stopgaps with guys who are, appear to be solid quality guys, but it's kind of like buying time until he can replenish through the draft. And it's really a smart use of free agency, whereas some teams just go and use free agency to just plug holes and slap bandages on gaping holes in the roster. Shane's doing it systematically. And I really like the direction he's taken this team. And, he's not, spending big money on players. I know he made the comment that, we no longer have to shop in the bargain bin basement, or something to that effect. He didn't say bargain bin, but we don't have to, be frugal with our spending. He's being judicious with the spending, being smart. And there's a difference. Some teams that have a ton of cap space go on wild spending sprees. And what does it get them? Now, I did put an article on Giants Country a few weeks ago saying how much the Giants did have to spend to meet the requirements as outlined by the CBA, but Shane has been judicious about it. And that can include, re-signing your own guys. It doesn't have to be spending on free agency. So really the way he's approaching building this roster up very smart, and brighter days are ahead for this Giants team. I just love the moves that they've made. There's really no moves that Shane has made so far that I can honestly say, what the heck is he thinking? I mean, the closest one, if I'm being honest with you, is the timing with Sterling Shepard. And I said this on the live stream yesterday. I felt like Sterling Shepard, that was one they could have probably waited on. But, to them, it was important to bring him back. And it just shows, again, I talk about that reward for the players who deliver and produce for the team. And that's what that showed. Sterling Shepard, even though he was injured, he was still there for his teammates. He was there for his coaches. He was there for his team. So it was kind of a reward for that, even though he couldn't contribute on the field. So overall, thus far, Joe Shane's just hitting it out of the park. Now, of course, it all depends on what happens, what they do on the field. Do they stay healthy? The Darren Waller trade, I love that trade because it's a low risk, high reward trade. And, we'll see how it all pulls together. I think it's going to be beautiful. If these guys stay healthy and they produce, it's going to be beautiful. And I can't wait to see it. All right, coming up next, Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts joins us to talk about Parris Campbell. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, the Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite Built Bar or Built Puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorite. I know I'm going to be voting for my favorite, which is Brownie Mint Puffs. I just got a new batch in today, and I absolutely love them. They will not last much longer in this house. I can tell you that much. So make sure you go and put in your vote for your favorite Built Bar or Built Puff at builtmarchmadness.com. And you'll be automatically entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. And one lucky Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to their door. Vote every day in March. And don't forget to pick up your favorite Built bars or puffs at 15% off on your first order when you use the promo code LOCKED15. Hey, Giant fans, thanks so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day or your first watch of the day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft to salary cap management and more, join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise on the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, available Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Happy to have you with us. And now joining me again on the program for the second time this week, always a pleasure to have him on, is Jake Arthur, co-host of the Locked On Colts podcast. He's here to tell us a little bit about Parris Campbell, the new receiver, one of the new receivers the Giants signed on Thursday. Jake, thanks so much for coming back on the program with me.
Yeah, of course. It looks like the Colts get all the Giants coaches and then the Giants get the Colts players. They're just trading off somehow.
Yeah, good point. I hadn't really thought of that. But so, Jake, what can you tell us about Parris Campbell?
I really like this move for the Giants. It's definitely a bummer for the Colts. I was hoping that the Colts would find a way to make it work. The contract was very doable for them, but it also is kind of an indicator that maybe both sides were ready for something different. So through his first 3 years, well, first off, Parris came in with a lot of fanfare, a lot of hype as a rookie, looked great in his first summer. But he was just snake bitten with these serious injuries his first 3 years, and he really barely played. Always generated some sort of hype in the summer and then just could not stay on the field. And he never really had that problem at Ohio State. He just kept getting these freak things that would require procedures. It's not like they were soft tissue injuries or anything that was nagging. But last year, he finally was able to stay healthy, played all 17 games, and he was really one of the Colts' most consistent offensive players. And that's in a group that, that has Jonathan Taylor, Quentin Nelson, Michael Pittman, a lot of notable guys, and Parris was one of the best among them. And that's with the carousel of quarterbacks that they brought in. So he's kind of a diverse player. I think he's going to be able to do more than what the Colts ultimately did with him. Through his first few years, they pretty much tried a different approach with him each year. He was kind of a gadget Deebo Samuel type guy in his first year. And then they tried to make him more of an outside player in year 2. He only lasted like 5 quarters though before he got hurt for the year. He was kind of their X receiver, their top guy early on in that second year. And then he's just been kind of a slot receiver since then. They tried to use him a lot more downfield in 2021 with Carson Wentz. And, it had some success before, again, he ultimately got hurt. So he's a guy who can do a little bit of everything. So I'm sure the Giants have an interesting plan for him. And as long as he stays healthy, he should be a weapon for Daniel Jones.
You mentioned the injuries. I'm not familiar with all the injuries he's had, but obviously if they were lower body ones, they can affect the guy's, speed, explosiveness. Have you seen any kind of drop off in that since you've been covering him?
Not really. I think he was ran a 4.31 or something like that at the combine that year. And you would assume that his speed really tailed off after all the injuries, because again, there was he had something with his foot. He's had something with his knee, his core. He's had a lot of different things. But there was a play last year against the Raiders where he took like a 10-15 yard slant route, split several defenders and raced to the end zone and beat everybody. And it didn't even look like he was going fast, but he was pulling away from everyone. So maybe he doesn't have the 4.31 speed anymore, but he's still going to be one of the fastest guys on the field whenever he's on it.
How is he in terms of separating?
Still really good. He's the type of guy who you see some of his routes in one-on-ones during practice and training camp and everything. And it's one that makes everyone in the crowd go, oh, leaving his defender in the dust. So he can be a really precise, have a lot of short area quickness. Again, it's one of those things, he could have had more of a deeper route tree, but we'll see what the Giants want to do with him. I think he's capable more, before in the route and after the catch. I think he's going to be capable of being a lot more of a complete receiver.
So you mentioned that the Giants could probably do a little bit more with him. What specifically do you think they can do with him that maybe the Colts haven't done with him yet?
I would use him downfield more consistently, and I think I would try to get him those chunk intermediate shots over the middle of the field, those 15-20 yard dig routes. I think would just give him a chance to run after the catch. His most significant body of the work with the Colts was more of a quick pass. They tried to get him yards after the catch stuff. But I would definitely, a guy with that speed, I would try to utilize him in the chunk plays more often. He can beat defenders one-on-one. He's going to require safety help against him. But again, those things, the 15-20 yard dig routes, he could be deadly on those, I think.
What about areas of his game that aren't fully developed yet? Where do you think the Giants should maybe either stay away from or use sparingly?
That's a good question. Because again, he's only have really one season where you've been able to see a full maturation process. Probably in traffic is one area. I did mention middle of the field, but that could be wide open at times. Probably concentration in traffic. He normally has very sure hands, but he can have those concentration drops, when the window is really tight and things like that. So if he could develop more of that, just converting over the middle or in tight spaces, because really the Colts used him a lot with, quick screens. There's really no one there. Lots of bubble stuff, quick slants, just things like that. So being a more complete player in traffic, in motion, things like that.
What about his downfield blocking? That's a skill that obviously, we don't talk a whole lot about when we talk about receivers, but one that is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't really say it's a weakness of his. He tries, he attempts. He's a try hard player. He's never gonna be taken off the field because he's not giving it his all. But I wouldn't say it's a strength of his. But, to me, I think that stuff can be taught. And especially with a guy with his speed, just teach him to, stay in front of the ball carrier, whoever's got the ball, and just get some mitts on the defender. But that's an area of his where you would never be like, yeah, he's one of the better blocking receivers in the NFL. But I definitely think he's more capable of that than probably what we've seen.
What kind of locker room guy is he?
Oh, great. Yeah. He's always got such a great attitude. He's someone we've talked to a lot because of injuries. Like this year, seriously, was the first time we got to talk to him mostly just about football, because everything is, Parris, how's this latest thing got, where's your head at? What's your mindset? This and that. And not that he hasn't had some down moments, because at a certain point you got to be like, why me? But he always comes through with it with, a clear head, a great attitude. And, he looks at it as, it's something he's got to overcome. And, there's a reason for it, basically. But guys love him in that locker room. You talked to Bobby today. Parris is another really, smart, well-spoken guy who you just kind of gravitate to. He's just got a friend vibe to him. It seems like someone you could just shoot it with, No, I've never heard anyone say anything negative about him. And, it's a guy for 3 years who was practically unavailable, but was a second-round pick. So guys in there seem to definitely like him.
And he seems to be a very resilient guy as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, 3 years in the league, you have all this hype. You're a second-round pick. The Colts couldn't have turned in their draft card faster for him. And, after 3 years of just getting these freak injuries, when you were not an injured player before in Ohio State, a lot of guys could have thrown in the towel, but, he stuck with it, played 17 games, and shoot, I mean, he knows what it's like to overcome adversity. And really, he's been able to help a lot of his other teammates that have suffered injuries, because he's been there before. Like if any of those other guys know who's been through it, it's him.
Yeah, that's a good trait to have, because injuries can drag a guy down.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, Jake, what's something about Parris that you think might surprise the Giants and their fans when they see him?
Ooh, that's a good question. So again, he hasn't done a lot of this since his rookie year. But, Colts fans have been clamoring for a while, diet Deebo Samuel, basically. Again, as a rookie, the Colts tried to use him as a gadget, multi-use player, and it looked really good at times. So he can return kickoffs. You can use him out of the backfield as a runner and everything. He's a toolsy player. He's not just a receiver. I don't know if the Giants plan on him being the slot receiver or what, but he can play in the slot, outside. You can be very creative with him. And I think Frank Reich had a vision for him that just never got to come to fruition, just because, number one, he was hurt a lot early on. And then, this year, the offense as a whole was a mess. So he's a very multiple player, and that's, the Giants, it's a franchise that likes those type of players.
Indeed. And they signed him to a 1-year deal. So it's kind of a low risk type of deal, another low risk, high reward type of deal.
Yep.
If he's able to stay healthy. I think there are incentives in his deal for every game that he is on the field. So the Giants definitely taking into consideration that injury history, which of course is a concern, but he did make it through last year. I believe he was active for all 17 games, right?
Yeah. He played in all, I think he was the only receiver to play in all 17 for him.
And that despite the problems that they had at quarterback, he seemed to be productive regardless of who was throwing the ball.
Yeah, all three of those quarterbacks, even though they were all kind of a mess, they knew they could get it to him to bail him out.
Well, it's he's a good addition. Looks like a good addition to the team. I'm not sure what that means for Darius Slayton, who's still unsigned, but I have a feeling it means that they did a swap out there. So, Jake, Arthur, thank you so much for coming on, giving us the lowdown, and coming on again a second time this week. And you were right, by the way, about Bobby. He was fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Really, you guys will really like him.
Guy. Yes, absolutely. And so far, so good with the players coming over from the Colts. You guys are raising them right over there.
Right, for sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And shoot, maybe we'll talk again. I know Slayton might be someone who is on the Colts radar, so maybe we'll link up again soon.
Absolutely. You know where to find me. All right. He's
Mhm.
Jake Arthur, co-host of Locked On Colts. Giant fans, don't go anywhere. We've got more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's currently roster building season in the NFL, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the sports world is idle. You've got the NBA going on, the NHL, baseball is going to be coming back soon, the WNBA, so much is going on. And right now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Yep, just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and it's Friday. Happy St. Patty's Day, by the way. No, it wasn't named after me, but hey, I'll take credit for it. St. Patty's Day, Patty, But seriously, I hope you have a safe and happy St. Patty's Day for those of you who are celebrating. Those of you who are not celebrating, happy Friday. We made it to the weekend. Hope you have great plans and are enjoying your week and had a productive week. I've had a busy week, but couldn't have it any other way. And I hope you've enjoyed the content this week on the Locked On Giants podcast. We're going to do it again next week. I'm going to try and do a post wave 1 free agency mock draft. I'm looking to get some guests on the program. Pretty soon, I'm going to start asking the college hosts to come on to talk about some of these draft prospects. So a lot coming up still on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you will continue to tune in. All right. Speaking of which, we have some questions from listeners that I want to get to. So I'm going to kick it off with one from Alan B., who writes, seems to me that Parris Campbell has a similar skill set as Wan'Dale Robinson. Does the signing indicate the Giants aren't expecting Robinson to be a contributor during the 2023 season? No, it has nothing to do with it. Campbell might have some overlap with Wan'Dale Robinson, but they're going to be used different ways. I really believe that. I don't think it's a sign that, Robinson, who may or may not be ready for the start of the year, I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think it's just, adding depth. You're adding a bigger receiver. I think Parris Campbell is like 6'3", whereas Wan'Dale is under 6 foot, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I don't think one has to do with the other, to be honest with you. Pete M asks, I recognize the low risk and high reward potential of both, but both Waller and Campbell have significant injury histories. Given that the Giants have been near the top of the league, does it concern you that these two pickups come with their injury background? Yeah, a little bit, because usually if a guy develops an injury background, it becomes a problem and it's not something that goes away. But here's what I would say to you, Pete. The Giants have been giving these guys hefty workout bonuses as an incentive to get their fannies into the facility. And I believe, and I could be wrong, I'm not a trainer. I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm not a sports scientist. But I believe that if they can get these guys into the facility and the strength and conditioning coach can devise a program for them to help guide them, to get ready, to improve their flexibility and all that stuff, then maybe the injury issues won't be a problem. I think players, look, there's a couple ways, obviously, players get injured, broken bones and stuff that happens during the course of the game. Sometimes you just can't avoid that. But a good strength and conditioning program can help you improve your flexibility, can help you improve your soft tissue strength, your ligament strength. So yeah, I think, you look at the high roster, the high workout bonuses, and I wonder if that's just not part of the thinking to get these guys in here, as opposed to having them train with, somebody who's maybe not a football, who's a general trainer, and not having these guys go through, exercises and whatnot, workouts that are specifically designed to help improve their flexibility and movement as it pertains to football. So the next time we get Joe Shane or Brian Dable, that is a question I do want to ask. I do want to find out, what did your studies reveal, and what are you going to do differently to maybe help with this injury situation? That is something I do want to ask, because again, my theory is the workout bonuses and encouraging these guys to come in and collect, that can help. Have no proof of it, but that's just a theory that I have regarding, what the Giants are trying to do to curtail the injuries issues. So we'll see. All right, we have one more question. This came in via Twitter from John F., who asked, do you think a number 2 and number 5 for Jerry Jeudy is a good deal? I'm not giving up a number 2. Nope. No. I think, and it's funny, on the stream, we talked about this, John. I could see the Giants going cornerback or center at 25. I would not rule out center. John Michael Schmitz is sitting there. No way he gets to the Giants in round 2. I don't see that happening. I would not be upset if they took him. It would be the first time, I believe, since 1989 that the Giants took a center in the first round. In 1989, they took Brian Williams, who I want to say, did he play at Minnesota? He might have played from the same school as Schmitz. I know Schmitz is he's from Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. Brian Williams, did he play? I'm just trying to think. Was he Texas? I can't remember. I want to say Brian Williams played at the I'm trying to remember where he played now. Oh, I'm drawing it. I know he was drafted in 1989. And here we go. I found it. I just looked it up. He played in Minnesota. Yes, I was right. Okay. I thought it was Minnesota. And I think that's where John Michael Schmitz plays, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Let me just look that up real quick. I think is he Minnesota too? Yep, Minnesota. How about that? Good memory, huh? All right. I had to cheat. I had to look it up. But yeah, I think, John Michael Schmitz, even though he's a little older than, your average rookie, he's probably the most NFL ready center in this draft. And if you're building that offensive lineup, you want youth on it, you want them all to kind of gel together, kind of like the approach Dallas took a few years ago with their all-world offensive line, which has since disintegrated. I'd be in favor of them taking Schmitz at 25 if he's sitting there, because I don't think he gets to them in round 2. I really don't. Could I see them taking a cornerback at 25 and then an offensive lineman in the second round? Possibly. But cornerback is so deep, I could see them waiting to day 2 to take a corner. So, yeah, to your question, though, no, I'm not giving up the second round pick. I don't think Shane's going to give up the second round pick. And, if Shane didn't trade for a wide receiver last year when he had the chance, Waller's basically the quote unquote receiver they got. Even though he's a tight end, he's a receiving weapon. So I don't see them making another trade. So, but interesting proposal on your part. But thank you for the question. Thank you all for the questions that you sent in. Keep them coming. You can send them to me on Twitter. Just tag them Ask P Train. You can send them to me via Instagram. You'll see my Instagram account where you can send them to me. Or you can email them to me at lockedongiantspodcast@gmail.com. That's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Now, unless there's major breaking news over the weekend, we will be back with you on Monday with a very interesting question regarding what the Giants have done and the effect moving forward for them. So tune in on Monday if you want to find out what that is. And I'm working to get you guests for next week. A lot of content still to come. Thank you for tuning into the Locked On Giants podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you on Monday.